Okay, so I've entitled this talk Bridging the Divide, because there's something about, and I should say I'm an Aquarian, and really Zachary ought to be giving this talk. He's the Gemini. But anyway, I'll let you know what my view on Gemini, and we welcome, of course, Zachary's involvement in the discussion. Okay, so when you look at the sign of Gemini, I think it's very visually obvious that it's a dualistic sign. And yet this particular motif, it looks quite like a doorway to me, if you look at it straight on. But if you were to lie it down horizontal, well, then you might think of it as a bridge. And I think that Gemini is both a doorway and a bridge. From the esoteric perspective, there are certain signs of the zodiac that build what we refer to as the rainbow bridge, and that's the pathway that is energetic through our aura and through the inner realms that links the personality in the body through the soul to the immortal self, the monad. And Gemini is one of those signs that helps create and build this bridge. So it is both a bridge and a portal. I suppose you could also say, well, it governs the twins. It's one of the twin signs of the zodiac. A Pisces is another one of the signs of the zodiac that's twin, and there are twin pillars. And that the energy of the twins has this duality about it. So, excuse me, what we see is not always what we get with Gemini. And generally there are two views of things. There's one view, there's the left-hand view and the right-hand view, there's the head, there's the heart. And then Gemini, being a twin constellation, has this connection to as above, so below. And I think of Gemini as being a gateway, and pillars, gateway to holy places. And if you've travelled, as I have, to various sacred places and sacred sites around the world, one of the things that you notice is that there are often twin pillars, whether they're at the doorway of a temple or even an outside, like a stone circle or something. There are energetic or physical pillars. And so in the Masonic tradition, we talk about the pillars of Boaz and Joshim. That's represents the fact that you are going from the known world through a portal into the unknown world. And so, of course, anybody who's got Gemini in their chart, and primarily when I say that, what I mean is that the sun in Gemini, the moon in Gemini, Gemini ascending, Gemini as a personal planet, one of the inner planets, or a progressed Gemini, then this theme of duality and crossing the bridge and going through the portal to the holy places. In the ancient tradition, the pillars of Hercules at the edge of the Mediterranean let people know that beyond the Mediterranean Sea, out beyond the pillars, was the unknown. Didn't know what was out there in ancient times. And they used to say there was nothing further beyond. So one of the challenges of the sign of Gemini is to get beyond the physical or the mental or the rational experience and open the inner senses to what is beyond the. What I wanted to talk about now are the world aspirants. So if you think about that path that goes from the known world through the portal to the unknown world, well, then esoterically, we're trying to move from the mutable signs of the zodiac, that's Gemini and Sagittarius and Virgo and Pisces, on the mutable wheel, across the bridge to get to the fixed signs, that's Taurus and Leo and Scorpio and Aquarius. And what happens with the aspirants, and we've all been aspirants at some point, is that we experience the world through the signs Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius and Pisces, and some of those signs lead directly. Think about the portal that takes you onto a bridge that one has to build oneself. That's the rainbow bridge. And so we build this bridge the further along we've gone in our life experiences. And so astrologically, those who are in the process of building the bridge will have a lot of the mutable signs in their charts. Those who are in the process of walking across the bridge will have some of the other fixed signs in their chart. It's a complicated story, really, but there are signs for the esoteric astrologer that indicate to us that the soul is leading and going and moving towards what we refer to as the path proper. You know, and the path proper is simply the spiritual path. It's the rainbow bridge. It's the noble eightfold path of the Buddha. And as I said, that the paths that lead to it are the mutable signs. And from all sides of the mountain we come, every single individual on earth who is aspiring to be the best version of themselves and to be awakened in their soul light will have come through the Gemini, the Sagittarius, the Virgo, and the Pisces. And I hasten to add that this does not mean that every Gemini is simply an aspirant or every Sagittarian's an aspirant. It's much more complicated than that. Okay, once we've gone through the portal and are looking for the world beyond the worlds, we enter into what is known as the probationary or the path of purification. And astrologically, the signs of Taurus and Aquarius, as well as the mutable signs, are very strongly connected to the need to purify, to clean up our act, to throw off what we're not, so that we can continue on. So to leave some of our baggage behind. And then what happens is esoterically, as the soul evolves, then the zodiac, the journey around the zodiac, instead of going anti-clockwise, we reverse the wheel, as it's known, and we reverse our attitudes, we reverse our selfishness to selflessness, we reverse our orientation. We realize that the physical world is the foil for the authentic inner worlds, which are the real worlds. So we recognize what's real and what's a complement thereof. And we do that through the sign of Scorpio, which is the great clearinghouse. I've got house there. It's the clearinghouse sign. And as we go through Scorpio, then we encounter what is known as the burning bridge. So anybody who's been involved with healing would understand this as a very strong connection to purification and the seventh ray. It's a big subject. I just wanted to explain to you the transition from the ordinary world of matter through the portal of Gemini, the building of the bridge, and onto the path, the wheel of the soul. How long this takes varies enormously. For one individual, it could be, I think the Lord Dwal says it can take up to 70 incarnations of being a spiritual aspirant before one becomes a committed, dedicated person who is going to put their heart and the soul light first and becomes a spiritual disciple. So this is a long-term evolutionary process that eventually leads to the sign of Leo, which we know esoterically is the sign associated with the birth, otherwise referred to as the first initiation. So if you look at the wheel, we'll say, okay, well, Pisces is one of these signs of aspirancy. So is Virgo. So is Sagittarius. So is Gemini. And they converge upon a path. And generally, therefore, people will have a bit of Taurus or a bit of Aquarius in their charts. And they will eventually arrive at the clearinghouse sign of Scorpio, where our task is to purify and clean up our act. This could be things from our birth, from recent incarnations, from incarnations a long way back, so that we can eventually be born again through the sign of Leo. And that effectively is what is happening on Earth, that humanity as a whole are striving to cross the bridge, go beyond the pillars of Hercules, the metaphorical, enter onto the burning ground and find our hearts and compassion and evolve as a species. Whether or not we are succeeding in this task, well, That's a matter for debate. Okay, now every sign of the zodiac has certain tests and trials that are particularly associated with them. And the sign of Gemini has 5 particular tests. And these 5 particular tests come from the labour of Hercules. And I'm not going to go into the labour of Hercules tonight because it's too long, but just suffice it to say that there were 5 tests that Hercules, who was the world disciple and world aspirant rather, and he became the world disciple, had to go through 5 tests to get to the journey, the journey's end of his quest. So the first test for all Geminis, this is someone with the moon in Gemini or Gemini rising or the progress descendant in Gemini, is that they have to recognise where there's a delusion, where there's a lie, where there's something that they think is authentic, which in fact is not. They have to recognise the real from the unreal. Easier said than done, because the nature of Gemini is to look a bit short-sightedly, myopically at things in the near vision and fail to miss the big picture. The second test for Geminis is to do with psychism and being ensnared or caught up in the astral world. The third test is about learning to recognise the authentic teachers and teachings as opposed to the false teachers or teachings. And of course, that gets harder and harder and harder here in the 21st century because we have the World Wide Web, and it's like we have every bit of information scattered in front of us. And for the aspirants, this is extremely confusing. How to tell what's real and what's not. How to not get caught up in what's going to be a dead end. Okay. The other 2 tests that are associated with Gemini. Well, the first one, selfishness. And in fact, the first 3 signs of the zodiac, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, have very strong lessons associated with getting beyond the fact that they need to look after number 1 first. And the issue with selfishness is that the vision is just all around the self, too close. And so therefore, the individual fails to respond to those in need who are beyond their own immediate circle. This is a very big test on the Earth, planet Earth at the moment. And the last of the tests is a failure to commit to soul service. What I mean by that is that we can do things that the personality wants, that the ego wants, but then there are tasks or directions or purpose that come from the heart of your soul and my soul and everybody's soul. And a commitment to that, and to make soul service number 1 rather than at the end of your list and you might get around to it or you might not. This is the enormous challenge, the failure to commit. Because Gemini, being a twin sign, being a mutable sign, gets extremely distracted. And so it's very, very easy to have a great ideal and to think you've made a commitment and then fail to follow through. Yeah, so this is a very important 5 tests of Gemini that, of course, are happening now in 2025 to certain souls who are aspirants on the spiritual path. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the rulership. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. That's the exoteric ruler. And you'll see Mercury there pretty close to the sun. Yeah, and then it's ruled esoterically by Venus. Yeah, and so we have Mercury, Venus, then here's the Earth. Okay, so the traditional ruler of Gemini, Mercury, means all the things that you were taught in primary school, the writing and the arithmetic, you know, the practical mundane things that we need to function in the material world. And all of those things are stored in one aspect of the brain, which we refer to as the lower mind, in the aura, sorry, the lower mind. And you know, the mind being quite mercurical, quite fixated on words and logic, can easily trick us, you know, and we don't quite necessarily know what facts we should be keeping or what we should discard. Think about all the things that you learned in school, as opposed to what about of that information you've retained that is valuable and useful in your life now. So the mind loves to be in control. It uses words or logic or the rational or the tangible to exert its control. And when it feels its control is under threat, it tries to distract us, or alternatively, if you happen to have a fixed Mercury, for instance, get one bogged down in a very deep belief system that is taking you nowhere. Now, for all the incarnations that we've had while we have been evolving on the mutable cross, when we haven't been aware of our soul, Mercury has, and the moon, but Mercury's had a very strong capacity to control us through the mind. And so when we go through the portal and find the bridge and begin building the bridge to our higher self, then what happens is that the Mercury in your natal chart, in your life, starts to feel very threatened because it's losing the capacity to control you. And what happens then is that the battle is set up within oneself between the lower mind, which is governed by Mercury, and the higher mind governed by Venus, which is the esoteric ruler of Gemini. Okay, so there are many things that we can do, not the least of which, and probably the most important, is meditation in order to strengthen our intuition, acts of compassion and service, actively collaborate. Collaboration is a wonderful Gemini word. Share your talents, your skills, and begin to develop selflessness. These are the things that we can do to build and foster our Venus if you have strong a Gemini in your chart, because it's extremely important, if you've got a lot of Gemini in your chart, that you know where your Venus is. A very strong battle going on for the soul of humanity to wake up and support the spiritual aspirants to move beyond their delusions, their confusion, their short-sightedness, their selfishness, and to find how and in what way they can contribute to the world right now. And of course, we do need to stand and be counted. I don't know whether other people saw, was it the Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations, who gave a very, very heartfelt speech in the last couple of days about what's going on in Palestine, you know, and he's weeping and talking, you know, like pleading really with the United Nations to intervene, because the United Nations are the body who are supposed to be there for everybody, and say enough. That is absolutely enough. What does humanity stand for? Do we stand for unity, or do we stand for separation? And we can do it individually, but we also have to recognize that there's something larger happening all around us, and that we can't, you know, there's a karma being played out nationally, culturally, all over the place. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Venus. As I said, no, I don't think I told you, did I? I told you that Venus is the higher planet of Gemini, but what I didn't tell you is that Venus is also the soul of Earth. That's the most important thing I've said so far. The planet Venus represents the soul of humanity. Yeah? The Egyptians knew this. Yeah, there's a beautiful, beautiful image there from Peter Christensen decades ago. How can you strengthen the Venus in your life? Well, I can't think of anything better than working with 17 Steps of Perfection, the meditation book by the lady Ananda Tarashan, and focus upon the qualities of Venus, which are love, goodness, and loyalty. The link to where you buy that book is at the end of the PDF that you can download from the website. Okay, now I'll talk a little bit now about the Venus cycle and Cazimi. Okay, so it's only really been in the last decade or two that astrologers started to work with the Venus Sun cycle, otherwise known as Cazimi. But what I've noticed is that most astrologers are using it for how can they have a better love life. Whereas as an esoteric astrologer, I'm far more interested in how can we get the soul of humanity into a dynamic interplay with humanity. Cazimi simply means the heart of the sun, which is an interesting term because that's also connected to the fixed star Regulus. So a little bit of astronomy. Venus is a little bit closer to the sun than the Earth, 225 days to go around, whereas we have the 356. Therefore,
55.
what is 8 Earth years is actually 13 years on Venus. Okay, now what happens as Venus does its dance around the sun is that it creates petals. They refer to it as the petals or the pentagram. So on one image as Venus, and Venus doesn't just go in one direction. It'll go forwards, it goes backwards, it goes forwards again. And as it goes through this forwards and backwards, retrograde and direct motion, it creates a 5-pointed star. Now, to an esotericist, this is extremely important because the 5-pointed star is the symbol for the ray of love in action, the 5th ray. Yeah? And the 5th ray is governed by the planet Venus. So esoterically, we see in the heavens the beautiful lotus, which is the pattern that's created when it's on its retrograde motion, and when it's on its direct motion, it creates the 5-pointed star or the pentagram in the heavens. Now, so Venus simply lets us know that it's extremely important. And did I say the 5th ray is to do with truth, higher truth, to do with accessing the intuition, the higher wisdom. Okay, now every time Venus, this is a little bit complicated and I won't have a lot of time to go into it, but every time Venus slows down, goes in a retrograde motion and back again, it stops at a particular point. And once every 100 years, there are 5 signs or 5 constellations where Venus stops before it begins to move in the other direction. And between now and I think it's 2032, I've got it written down somewhere, for most of the last 100 years, Venus has been stopping in the signs of Gemini, Leo, Scorpio, Capricorn, and Aries. Now, I find this quite interesting because for the last 100 years, humanity en masse are getting closer to their soul evolution, the first initiation, moving beyond the path of purification into greater soul connection through the sign of Leo. In order to get there, we have to go through the signs of Aries and Gemini, which tend to be quite self-focused. We need to move through the sign that strips us of everything that we can possibly let go of, the sign of Scorpio, in order to arrive at the path proper, which is designated by the sign of Capricorn. So I don't think there's any coincidence in the fact that Venus keeps stopping in these 5 signs and creating in the heavens this most beautiful lotus and pentagram. It's a message for all of us to see if we could listen. And I'm inclined to think that it's a call from the heart of the universe, through the heart of our planetary higher self, that's Venus, to the soul of Earth, to me, to you, to move on, to awaken, to be better versions of ourselves. This beautiful divine pentagram and these portals of Venus are demarked, and thank goodness for the astronomers of the world who've been able to go back through the years and demark exactly the dates when Venus goes from retrograde to direct and what degrees it stops upon. And as I said, I'm not the least bit interested in using, and these stopping points are known as the Venus star points. And as I said, I'm not the least bit interested in using those to find my perfect partner or my romantic love match, because to me, this is about humanity's evolution. Okay, so yes, they are the Venus star points. I told you that, and they are stopping. Now, they have been stopping in Scorpio, Leo, Gemini, Aries, and Capricorn in roughly the same degree. I think, well, my mathematics is not that great, my astronomy, roughly the same degree for about 100 years, and then they slowly retrograde. And I think it's fairly, in the next couple of years, we will move out of the Scorpio phase into the Libra phase, which I find very interesting. This Scorpio is to do with this purification for the spiritual aspirants who are ready to be committed and determined. And then the sign of Libra is associated with many things, not the least of which is the energy of Shambhala, which of course is a whole other story. So what we're talking about here is the sun occulting with Venus. Now, sometimes, and this is where I have trouble because I'm not an astronomer, sometimes Venus passes behind the sun, and from the position of Earth, we can't see it. Other times, Venus passes in front of the sun. Yeah. And the astronomers have taken photographs, and this is actually a video I found online, and I've just got the picture there, but if you found the video, you can see Venus starting out there and going along behind the sun, and then somewhere around here, it stations and retrogrades and then goes back the other way and creates one of those little lotuses. Okay, this Venus cazimi is known as in a few ways. Some people refer to it as the Venus occulting or transiting the sun. Some people just simply refer to it as the Venus star points. For reasons that I don't understand astronomically, only twice in a century does Venus cross in front of the sun. And we had that, and they're always 8 years apart, 2004 and 2012. And I know that Zachary and Mary and I went down to watch that event. Yes, and I know Captain Cook was also noted. So that's an image. There's Venus crossing the face of the sun, and that's from the 2004 photograph taken in China. Okay, I'm running out of time here. So this beautiful diagram of the cosmic pentagram is created by the morning star and the evening star. And I look at this as Gemini being a dual sign, and a portal and a bridge is trying to create a relationship between the worldly Venus, which you can see here on the right, and the holy Venus, shall we say, known as Minerva, who really stands for wisdom, Pallas Athena, there on the left. And so I think it's about lifting us from the physical, sensual Venus into the esoteric Venus. And this is what all of us are doing. And there's the date I couldn't remember. And 2026 is the last time that the cazimi, or the star point, happens in Scorpio. Now, you know, if you go in and wash your car in a car wash, you put your money in the slot and you choose how much you want to spend, and it'll tell you you've got 8 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Then you sit there while it does the sort of the cleaning, gets rid of all the mud, buffs and polishes, and the final rinse. I look at this last star point as the final rinse, 23rd of October 2026, given that the cazimi has been in Scorpio for the last 100 years, approximately 1926 through to 2026. So that's it. Our time for cleaning up our act is over. And then after a 4-year break, we have the new cazimi cycle starting in Libra, which has this connection, to the way I look at it, into the Shambhala portal. And this is a whole other story associated with the will of God. So I think about all of this as Venus calling us, a bit like a caller from a bush dance. And does humanity respond? It's a dance. There's a call and response, and a call and response. We refer to this esoterically as invocation and evocation. And literally in the dates where we are now, in 2022, the call went out through the sign of Libra, the end of Libra, which I think is either to aspirants who are very young aspirants or to the disciples. Another call went out, and these calls are coming from the star points when Venus stops, probably behind the sun, I suppose. And the call in 2023 was in Leo. Well, to me, that is a call to those probationary disciples, those who are in the process of birth or the soul is very closely connecting into them. And of course, the call's to all of us, but I'm inclined to think that there's a call particularly to certain people according to where they are in their development on the spiritual path. The call that we've had last year, 2024, was in the cross quarters, the critical degree of the middle of Gemini. To me, that is, come on, world aspirants, get it together, move forward, see what's true and real. We've had a wake-up call. The fourth call in March this year was in the third degree of Aries, which is primarily a call to the world aspirants again. And the next call we have, or the next Venus star point, is very early in 2026, and it falls in the sign associated with the path of discipleship. That's Capricorn. And so I think this is a call to the world disciples, those who already have the soul energy dynamically active in their life. And I'm wondering whether it's the Board of Karma who are actually getting involved there. And these 5 invocations and evocations in the period that we're in at the moment, to my mind, seem to fit with those 5 tests or challenges associated with Gemini and the world aspirants, and Hercules, the world aspirant. And so I think the message is, how many of humanity want to be involved in a planet where there's love, a planet where there's higher truth, a planet where there's selfishness? How many people want to join the dance? And how many are deluded or confused or lost or can't find their way out? Venus calls us to liberate, calls us to expand so that we can make the best of the planet that we live on, requires us to shine the light on the things we've been obscuring from ourselves. And when that happens, when we get enough of the truth and the light, then what happens is eventually we end up from the 5-pointed into the 6-pointed star. And the 6-pointed star is a symbol for Israel, which of course is going in the opposite direction, so it appears to me, not the Israeli people, but the government of Israel. But it's also associated with the soul-infused personality, a degree of cooperation between the higher self and the lower self. And that is the purpose of the sign of Gemini. Soul planet of Earth, 5th ray, love in action, 5-pointed stars. And who is it who's calling us? The call is coming from the heart of the Holy Ones, from the heart of the 5th and the future Buddha of Earth, the Lord Maitreya. And the tests and the challenges, as I said before, are blindness, delusion, psychism, astral ensnarement, false teachers' teachings, plain old selfishness, refusal to help, or a failure to serve in a way that doesn't benefit the individual. All of those that I told you before, I just wanted to point out that the 4th one, the one that's occurred around about the time that they stopped allowing the food and the aid into the Middle East, was the 4th call. And from the Hercules myth, the 4th test is to do with, will Hercules give up what his plan was and go and help another who suffers? Yeah, go and help. And so humanity has had literally, what is it, 8 weeks ago, a bit more, the very strong call to give up selfishness and go and help. Yes. Okay.